Hi, everybody. Welcome to this podcast, Who's in My Pew? This is a podcast made by the Church of St. Pius X in Laurenville, the Diocese of Albany. We are so glad to have you all here to watch and to listen our podcast. First of all, thank you all for watching and listening Alexander's Turpin podcast last week. It was wonderful. It was over 500 people, more than 500 people who watched and listened that podcast. We are so glad for him. We feel so proud, especially because he belongs to our community. That's awesome to have that opportunity. And thank you also for those who watch our podcast about the college experience and to submit questions or send it to me by email or stop by after Mass here in the office to give those questions to me. I appreciate that, and we love you all. This week, we have a very special podcast because a lot of people asked me before about this topic of stress, how we manage stress, how we deal with that. And, we are very blessed to have in our community professional people who they really know about this more than anybody else. And, I'm so glad today to have with us Jose, who is here, beloved member of our community. Jose, introduce yourself for our beloved people.
Hi, my name is Dr. Jose Gonzalez. I'm a psychiatrist and parishioner of St. Pius.
How many years as a parishioner here, Jose?
I think around 8 years.
And
also I still go over to Church of the Blessed Sacrament.
Okay. Do you like Blessed Sacrament as well?
Yes.
What is
like
the
both.
most special thing to you about Blessed Sacrament Church? I like the building, but what is special to you?
Well, I think they're complementary with each other. One is slightly, this is larger, more welcoming. The other one is sort of a slightly older tradition. But I think it's a balance between both. We're, worshiping God wherever we are. So both of them are, there's many ways to the Lord.
Yeah. I love Blessed Sacrament. This is probably my sixth year in the diocese, and I never visit Blessed Sacrament before until this Holy Week. I don't know if you know that they did something with a passport that you go and visit 7 churches, and that was my first time going with Father Walsh to Blessed Sacrament, and I love it. It's like, all very traditional church. I love it. I like it. Jose, your first time here at St. Pius. Do you remember the first time that you came to St. Pius?
Yes.
Who was celebrating Mass? Tell me.
Yeah, well, it was a Mass. It was a few years before COVID. It was a very large and welcoming community. Actually, my children came. My ex-wife actually studied here.
Okay.
My son actually spent I think like 2 years here before he went to Christian Brothers. And so it's always been in the back of our mind. And so when I was searching around for different churches at different times, I was like, so I tried different ones, and this was very welcoming. The fun thing is in the beginning of Mass when Father says, well, if you're new here, welcome.
That's Father Walsh all the time.
So it's been a very good experience.
Yeah, I remember my first time talking to Father Walsh, my first day here at St. Pius. Think number one, he said, Daniel, we are a welcome church. This is about welcoming people, helping the people to have a real experience of Jesus Christ, but always welcome, make them feel like this is their spiritual home, and that's very, very good. Jose, tell me a little bit about your life as as a Catholic. How you found the Catholic faith, the Christian Catholic faith, relevant for your life today, especially with your background, about all over the mind and the study of the mind.
Okay, so my background, my family was Catholic. I went to Catholic elementary school. I had Irish nuns from first grade on.
Any memories about the Irish nuns?
Oh, yes.
It's always funny.
Always funny, So some of them were like typical older nuns, some of them were crabby. Some of them were nice. Some of them just sincerely loved us for who we were, and you could feel the love coming from through them. And so it was an interesting experience. Some of us were rowdy kids when we were younger and things like that, but it was always the sense of religion. So we always went to Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school, New York City. My father died in an airplane accident, and my family moved back to Puerto Rico. And I had the same Irish nuns in Puerto Rico that I had in New York City.
Beautiful.
Oh, yeah. School Sisters of Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. Shout out to them.
Yeah. Good to them. That's the Catholic Church. We are everywhere. We are a universal church. That's the beauty.
Yeah.
It's the beauty.
And at that time, I was fortunate because one of our teachers, our science teacher, was also our religious instructor on religious philosophy. So he had us do the philosophy of religion.
Okay.
In addition to the science. So as Pope John Paul II mentioned, we balance between faith and reasoning. Mm-hmm. And so when he wrote that encyclical, it actually was exactly how I had been taught since, first grade. So we always balanced both things. And then, high school, he was our chemistry teacher. I actually studied biochemistry in college, and then went on to medical school and psychiatric residency here at Albany awesome. Medical Center.
Awesome. Why continue being a Christian? Why did you find beauty in this message of Jesus Christ today?
Well, because faith is a gift from God. Mm-hmm. Faith is a gift from God, but you have to cultivate it. It's like gives you mm-hmm. seeds, but you have to do something with the seed. So I actually, being a good scientist, I sort of started reading other religions. So I read the Quran. Very interesting, but Islam, the English translation of Islam is "you must submit." Uh-huh. That's not the Catholic Church.
No.
God invites us. It's always, we invite you to come here. We don't force you. We invite you. It is not submission. And then you read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the scripts from India. I've read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And various others, including, I don't know if you've ever seen about this, actually probably the latest religion, which is Falun Gong, the one that they do in China. Uh-huh. That one's interesting, but it doesn't have as rigorous a philosophical background as Catholicism. You know, there's no part of the Catholic religion that is not tied in. It's a wonderful whole. There's many aspects to it, but it's all one message, and it's all one consistent message mm-hmm. throughout the history.
It's like full integrated mm-hmm. into life. This, like 2 hours ago, we were recording, Nick and I, the little preview with the readings for this coming weekend that we always do. That is at the very end of the Tuesday update. For those who are watching the Tuesday update, it's at the very end. We always do like a summary and some comment about that. And I found interesting that this weekend, the readings are about the Council of Jerusalem, Acts mm-hmm. chapter 15. Mm-hmm. And the situation was, you have the disciples, a group of people helping them to continue the mission, but a lot of people from different backgrounds, they are approaching the disciples mm-hmm. and they're trying to be, Christians, to be followers of Jesus Christ. And the apostles, they need to sit down with their people to make decisions about how we can integrate the mission and the faith of Jesus Christ into the life of people that they have no Jewish mm-hmm. background. How we can put this message for everybody. And mm-hmm. I think that's the beauty. I know you know a lot about other different religions, but mm-hmm. That's the beauty of Christianity. Everybody is able to put something of Jesus Christ in their lives. Jose, a message to somebody, because we have a lot of people, especially the young people from Siena that we have conversations. If you're a scientist, you believe in science, you have all that background. how science are connected with the faith from your view, how they are
Sure.
now like two different poles, how they are,
Yeah.
they can be together.
They have always been linked. If you go back, if you might have heard, in people who believe in like evolution and science. So the idea of the Big Bang Theory. Most people don't know that one of the two people that helped create the Big Bang Theory was actually a priest. I think people are always astounded when they hear that, but the truth is, especially starting off way back, even before the Middle Ages, science was always linked to philosophical thought. I think the thing I like about the Catholic Church is just Catholic means universal. So it's always all education in the Western Hemisphere actually started in Catholic universities, which started from Catholic schools, and it went on from there. So what leads us up to it is the sense of, if you want to, interesting, Islam took a different path. In the 1100s, there was, in both the West and in the East, there was an idea, well, we can't understand God. So Islam took the sense, we can't understand God, let's not do anything. Catholicism took the same, we can't understand God, well, let's at least understand his creation because we're part of his creation, and then it went off in that direction. So as we start understanding science, we're understanding God. Because if you go to the Big Bang Theory, there's nothing. Somehow there's nothing, never was anything, there was no time, there was nothing, there was not matter, not antimatter, but nothing somehow became something. Big Bang Theory, and then all this other stuff happens. But there's flaws in it. For example, it can only go at the speed of light, so there's no creation beyond the speed of light. According to current science, there's no creation beyond that. So what is there? Nobody knows. They can't define it. Yeah. Not matter, it's not antimatter, and it's not dark matter, which is sort of an interesting concept too.
Yeah.
So all of these lead you to the philosophy of the religion, in which case we then go to the classical philosophers. And then they lead us off into St. Thomas and all of those. All the
St. Thomas of
Church.
Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then we have the book of Genesis, they relate about the creation, the story of the creation. Beautiful way to explain, Jesus Christ, God the Father, and the Holy Spirit acting together, the creation of the world. Oh, that's beautiful. Jose, stress. That's the topic of the day. And thanks for being open to talk about this. Tell me from your view how you can define stress.
Well, stress is a subjective feeling of tension that a person has. It can be attributed to both either internal or external things.
Body or mind.
Body or mind. And sometimes in mental, it's from a physical perception of it or a mental perception. People are subjected to stress from the moment they're born. So even the moment of being born. Interesting. When a child is born, he changes his circulation from breathing in basic amniotic fluid to having to breathe in air. Your arteries and your veins all of a sudden change function, complete change of function. Everything changes. So you start out screaming.
Yeah.
There was actually a psychiatrist called Otto Rank. He said, being born is a trauma.
Yep.
But then again, if being born is a trauma, everything is a trauma. But so as we're born, stress happens even from the beginning. Stress can lead to either change and improvement, or it can be detrimental to the person. Some of it depends on your perception of it and the nature of what they call the stressor, the thing that causes stress, and what I like to call your support systems.
Okay. This past weekend, I have a good conversation with one of our parishioners, and he asked me, Father, why I'm dealing with stress, even with positive things happening in my life, because we associate stress with problems, that it can be a problem. But he said, like, no, it's a lot of positive things happening in my life. Why I'm feeling stress if everything is good, you know?
And that's that sense of that inner tension that people have from certain things that are stressful, but then you're not quite sure why that's a stressor. Sometimes happy things. Sometimes that what's identified as internally is as much a stressor as some things which are joyous for people. So some of that is the emotional letdown. Sometimes there's a buildup of the tension that a person has. It's a happy occasion, say a wedding, a baptism. And then after that comes an emotional letdown. The person perceives that as a stress, when in reality it's their body adjusting to a lower level of tension. So they're perceived, oh no, things are going fine. I just got married.
Yep.
Oh, why am I stressed?
That was the question. That was exactly the case.
Yeah. And so the person perceives it as that. Part of it is, in today's society, there's less support systems to help the person. Whereas before, you used to have more interactions with other people. Now there's less. The families are, nuclear families, much smaller, which is one of the advantages of being here a member of St. Pius and Church of the Blessed Sacrament, in that you have a community, a support community. And in that, there's actually groups for different stages of different people at different stages in their life. So there's men's group for just men. There's groups for support groups for people who are married, people who are divorced, for children, for people in school, elementary school, for people in high school, and even for people who are away from college, young adults. So that at each stage of your life, the Catholic Church is there supporting you. It's not like you go out there somewhere and then come back every Sunday. You know, it's part of a continuum.
How are the hormones like adrenaline or cortisol playing a game? You know, playing an important role in the stress thing.
Well, the stress can be positive or negative depending on how the person perceives it. Even the same stress, for a person at different stages in life, perceive it differently. So as that happens, the body tries to deal with the stress. Originally, the way it tries to deal with the stress is putting out stress hormones. Cortisol, norepinephrine, dopamine. Part of it is also the delicate interbalance between all of those neurotransmitters and hormones. Some of them are hormones, some of them are neurotransmitters. And there's a delicate interplay between that and the brain. They feed off each other. So the way I explain it to people is, look, I can make you feel anxious without you feeling anxious. So the way I explain it to people is, look, you can go see a horror movie. You're not feeling anxious. You go see the horror movie, your body starts reacting to the stress. Your cortisol levels goes up, your epinephrine, and all of a sudden you hear a noise and you start. But that is stress from the outside. Now, people with other types of stress go into chronic stress. Oh, haven't slept well, I have to get up in the morning, I hate doing this, let me get a cup of coffee. The coffee has caffeine, the caffeine stimulates the release of norepinephrine and dopamine. That causes, and that after 10 o'clock starts decreasing, so your cortisol levels goes up, your melatonin level goes down, and then you start going around 4 o'clock, and then all of a sudden your cortisol levels drop. Your ability to fight stress decreases and your ability to tolerate that decreases. So it's a delicate balance between both of them. Sometimes you can tilt it one way or you can tilt it another way. There's psychiatric medications that do that, but in fact, some of them are not that good because they have extreme side effects. There's actually other techniques. Some of them involve at least what I do with my patients. Some of them involve cognitive work, but also I expect them to do religious work.
Could you give me an example of that that alternative treatment when you integrate, the scientific component with the religious side?
Sure. When I have a patient that has anxiety come to the office, I like to give them. I'm not limited to giving them medications. I'm trained to do therapy from. I started reading Freud when I was 14. Okay. Introductory lectures of psychoanalysis. From then on, it got much easier, and especially during the psychiatric residency. So what you do is you help the patient have not just one coping mechanism, medications, but you also have them do therapy. There are different parts of therapy. For example, anxiety patients, first thing I have them do is I have them do breathing exercises. The breathing exercises actually help them control epinephrine release, serotonin release. It's what they call the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. So you can actually change that by simply changing your breathing. And I practice. I've actually had patients come over to my office, and all they did was practice breathing techniques or meditative techniques in the office. So we were able to practice them. Those are also similar to the techniques that happen in intense prayer. Popes Benedict and John Paul II, especially
like
John Paul
in
II.
deep meditation.
Exactly. So there is no difference for the body physiologically from meditative techniques and intense prayer. The body reacts in a similar way.
Okay.
So you can use the spirituality component, and I like to do that in some of my patients, with their permission, of course. What we touch upon is some of the religious aspects to it. So I have them go into a meditative state, not yoga state, meditative state where they're accepting God's grace, which is always there. And that's the beauty of the religion. People forget God's grace is always there. So because God's grace is perfect, that perfection can go into you, and that helps people with the stress. There's actually a famous French sociologist, his name was Durkheim. He talked about something called anomie. Anomie is the sense of loneliness, even when you're in a crowd. And some of that he perceives as happening from society, especially when there's a change in society or a breakdown in society, that the person, even though they may feel fine, they get bombarded. You get dopamine hits in the brain from all the, going over TikTok and all of those. And then when that stops, all of a sudden there's a decrease in the person's volitional sense, and that causes stress. But that also causes you to get fixated on the dopamine hit. Now, so Facebook knew about this, and all of these other companies, they realized that, okay, you had to do it to keep on advertising for them. But in truth is some of that doesn't help people. No. That's why you have internet addiction, for example.
Yeah, that's why I think I'm not anti social media. I don't use social media in a personal level that much, but especially for the younger people who are listening to this podcast, we have to be very careful with the social media, because it can lead us to these kind of experiences of stress and things like that are definitely not good. And I just remember that I was having this conversation, preparing myself for this podcast, with one of the SUNY Albany students. We have a nice conversation about the stress. He's taking math classes, not math, but something related with psychology. And he said to me, like, not all the stress are harmful. It's some stress that is good. It's how he described that. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes.
He gave me a name called eustress.
Yes, I've heard the term. That was a recent term, but I want to address what you mentioned. There's actually, when my daughter was born, there was a book that came out. It was kind of interesting. It was called The Other Parent. It said all children.
By who?
I'm blocking out the name, but that's exactly the title.
Okay.
The other. So it said all children have three parents: father, mother, and everybody else. That everybody else is social, is who they're exposed to, what happens in school, what they listen to, what they watch on the video, what's in social media. So some children develop a sense of themselves, which is develop that influence more so than the parent. So they pay more attention to that than the parents, creating a conflict, because those things are fragmented and not meant for what you need. It's actually only meant to keep you watching it, because that's the only way they make money. So sometimes when that's happening, people get stressed, not because of anything wrong with their parents, but because some other person is telling them, oh, you should feel horrible. Why? They want you to, because they have to get you to continue watching them. If they tell you, oh, no, you're fine, you won't watch them. That's why when you watch the news, it's always, if it's got blood, sweat, and tears, it's the first in any news story. Any half-hour news show, it's got blood, sweat, and tears, that's the first thing. Then that's the sense that people have. And then all of a sudden, the nice part is always the last minute or so, when they try to sort of give something a little bit more morally uplifting. Yeah. So society in itself puts a kind of stress.
It's always like the business component.
Right. There's always a business component. That's true. And some of it, really, a good example, when I was young, the evening news was at 10 o'clock. And then they moved it to 11. Well, you just changed society. Everybody's now going to go to sleep at 11 o'clock. So you now had one less hour of sleep, which decreased productivity. It's an interesting thing. It made them money because they had more advertising. But on the other hand, you threw a whole generation into sleep deprivation.
Yeah. Jose, any suggestion for those people that are skeptic about therapy, that they think that therapy is very ineffective? Because sometimes I found that, especially when I'm doing confession, I'm trying to help the people to understand that the sacrament of confession is different than a therapy. It's different component.
Right.
Component. It's more spiritual, and therapy is another thing. And every time that I suggest, I think you need to see a therapist to talk about these certain topics, they are like what? Any suggestion to them about that? That
has been a question that's been asked many times, and there is. But I always tell my priest friends, we overlap. We overlap.
I know that.
So in psychiatry is that branch of medicine that studies feelings, actions, and thoughts. Actions, and thoughts. So as a priest, you deal with the same thing, but a priest deals with character, a sense of morality and what is right or wrong. That is the area that I do not deal with. So in therapy, no competent psychiatrist should tell you you're doing something evil. Whereas a priest can say for exactly the same thing, you're doing something evil. Yeah. And the absolution for that is through a priest, not through a psychiatrist. So I view our overlapping and complementary in many ways, but you guys have a connection with God as priests, So you're able to channel. Now, the grace comes from God through you, but I say, you have to realize the priest is also a person. It's like an electrician. The electricity, that comes from nature. The electrician doesn't produce the electricity. You're a conduit, but you have to go use the electrician to get to where you need to go.
Yeah, Jose, you opened the Pandora box here with a very special topic. What is your view on the absolution? Your psychiatric's view of the absolution, where the priest at the end give you an absolution. Do you know what is?
Oh, yes.
You know how the mind works, the internal process. How do you see the absolution that, of course, we believe and we know has a spiritual effect, and you are new by the grace of God and by His forgiveness of love and love. But what is the psychiatrist's view of the absolution?
I think it's powerful and beautiful.
I'm sorry. So the absolution is the prayer that I do at the very end. God the Father of mercies, through the death and resurrection. That last prayer, when I give you the blessing, that's what we call the absolution. Go ahead.
Yes,
Sorry to interrupt.
It's wonderful. I think it's actually therapeutic for many people because they carry around guilt, anxiety, and stress about many things. That an absolution, knowing that you're channeling through God, forgiveness for that. Psychiatrists can't give anybody forgiveness.
Of course not.
We can help them deal with the emotions. We can't forgive them. Some of the things they misperceive, but they have the sense of forgiveness. It's like when you see on TV and in the media, all of a sudden somebody says, "I'm sorry." They're not really sorry. They just say that as a social compulsion. Whereas when we go to confession, we do the three components. So we're admit that we have fault, sincerely repent for our fault, and acknowledge that we will not do that again. Those are the three components that are required for a confession. Those, many times when people say that I'm sorry, they don't mean any of those things.
Yeah.
So a confession has all of them, and confession can be a wonderful supplement to therapy. They are not mutually exclusive, and some of them will help with things that the other one can't help with. Now, if you're going to go to a psychiatrist, not all psychiatrists are trained in doing therapy. For us, it was rigorous. Even a psychologist doesn't have the same training we do in therapy. So just from the psychiatric residency here at Albany Medical Center. So we had to meet with a patient for an hour, write down everything that they said and everything we thought. And then I had to go to my supervisor for an hour and go over every single thing the patient said, every single thing I said, and why did I say that. So some of the teachers would be, "You idiot, that patient was saying this, you were thinking that." And I'm like, oh my God. So we had to do that training, 4 years, 4 patients for 4 years. So 8 hours a week for 4 years.
My gosh.
Yeah. And that's in addition to all your other work.
I understand. We have something similar at the seminary, at least at my seminary in Chicago, Mundelein. And when we train us to do the sacrament of reconciliation, they hire professional actors to be there. And, we did confession in front of 100 people just for them to see. And we received that kind of very direct and sincere feedback about how we did, why we, suggest this, or the penance we give to this particular person. And that reminds me that, Jose, that's something about the forgiveness that is special. A couple of months ago, I'm always speaking about my experiences with the students, but the reason is because I use the university's library for my personal research on my day off. And a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, I went to always Siena people, but I love Siena College. We love you. I love the library and the students. We have a strong connection between St. Pius and Siena. I was at the library. That was a Thursday, and I was dressed as a priest, black, with my collar on, sit down doing the research. And one of the students came to me and say, "Father, I'm no Catholic, but I feel I need to talk to you about this because that will be a way for me to feel forgiveness." And I saw that like a kind of, he's using me for something, but I can see the component, like sometimes people, they need the forgiveness. It's different because I'm sure this student, she went to therapy before and she was like, "No, I just need somebody to say to me like you are forgiven." And of course, I have the nice conversation. I didn't give any absolution because it wasn't a confession, but I can see, that powerful difference, that distinction between therapy and confession. That's beautiful. The forgiveness
And I
component.
think if used correctly, both of them will complement each other in a way that each one can't. With the confessional part, bringing in some of the forgiveness from God and helping you with the emotions that you have in dealing with that. So God is always forgiveness. So I think it's an artificial divide to make people think you need one or the other. They're both complementary, and they both work so well together that it helps people even in their spiritual evolution. And people neglect their spiritual evolution. There's actually a psychiatrist, his name is George Valiant. He actually wrote a book called Spiritual Evolution. A lot of the astronauts, when they went out into space, Neil Armstrong talks about this. He's like, I understood myself better as a human being when I was outside the world. And you realize all the creation of God. And he's like, oh my gosh. That's when his spiritual evolution came more in understanding the full depths of what God is for us.
Okay. Thanks for always your suggestions with books. That's awesome. Jose, now we know that we don't have full control of ourselves in matters of stress. Now just playing that can be a lot of factors outside or inside that can happen and lead you to experience this stress. But what can be very bad habits in your knowledge that can lead us to stress? What can be a bad habit?
Well, once people, social media is now one of the biggest things that is becoming increasingly a bad habit for people. The funny thing is, a lot of this was addressed in science fiction books a long time ago.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I never heard that before.
Oh, yeah. So, for example, what does it mean to be human? When you have robots, if they think, does a machine think the same way you do? These have all been dealt with in terms of science fiction. So interestingly enough, as you get into it, you realize some of these issues have already been dealt with before, where technology starts interfering with human function. And then some people become dependent on the technology, and those lead to sources of stress. A lot of the social media is very isolating. Durkheim didn't have the same idea of it when it started. He was just talking about social isolation because of social chaos. But in fact, you're inviting social chaos when you're doing social media. That becomes isolative. So the person tends to only feed on that because that's where you get your dopamine hits, follow through. And then, interestingly enough, the dopamine levels start decreasing. And you're doing it, same as a drug addict. This is the same thing as a heroin addict because it's the same mechanisms in the brain. So when I used to work in certain areas dealing with substance abuse patients, they describe, let me give you an example. When you take heroin, and when you take heroin, the first time you take heroin, you get the highest high you've ever had. You blow out your receptors, they're called mu receptors, and you blow them out, meaning you stimulate them in such a way they've never been stimulated before and will never be stimulated that way. After that, every other time you do heroin, that high is never the same high that you got the first time. So at a certain point, you're not looking for the high. You're just looking for avoid the low that comes beyond that. In substance abuse, you call it chasing the high-low, because now you can't get that high anymore, and everything else is a pale imitation of that. And now you're just avoiding the low that comes after not having the high. So what I tell people is when you do certain drugs, it's like you took the thermostat in your house for the air conditioning and you lit a match under it. It will never work the same way. It will never work the same way. So social media happens with that. The level of dopamine becomes a certain way, and you start going down. That's why some people mindlessly scroll to things and I think, why am I looking at this? You know, I've been here 2 hours, 3 hours. The average now for, interesting enough, an 8-year-old is to spend 2.5 hours in social media. That's Facebook and all of them. So 2.5 hours of the day. I mean, those are amazing numbers. So, and some of it is mindlessly scrolling. You see this, and the algorithm just feeds it to you. In a certain sense, you're like, why am I watching this? You ask yourself.
Now I found interesting is some videos, these short videos in Instagram and YouTube and Instagram. They ask you, are you interested in continue watching this? You know, it's just to keep you in the same note, you know, watching the things that are good for you. Okay, we have one. There is social media. We have to be very careful with that to avoid the stress. What can be other different practice
Oh, yes.
to expose yourself to stress?
One, to decrease some of the stress, you have to take care of yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually. And once you start doing that, you start being able to really take care of yourself in a way that a lot of people don't anymore. Part of that is the social isolation. So a lot of times what used to be, you know, there were 10, 20 kids, you'd be able to play with one of them, and as many as you needed to. Now there's only 2 kids. So all of a sudden, your ability to socially, to be there with other people decreases. And that brings people back to what's available. Now, what's available is frequently social media, but which is not as satisfying. So that's why I think if you look at it, churches, in trying to help the individual, help give them support systems that they wouldn't normally have and give them a consistent sense of themselves. In many ways, children, especially children who are foster children, have to go through that in the foster kid. So they have to adapt to whatever family's there. They adapt to whatever family because they want to belong. But you don't get a uniform answer. You don't get a uniform message. You don't get a uniform identity. Here you will always get something attributing to yourself that which enhances you as a person. And you can always make sure that that's always been there.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you, Jose. Now, you know, we know therapy good. We need to do that. Going to a psychiatrist if you need it. You know, reducing the social media exposure for you. Here I have a couple of questions. Not a couple. I have a lot of questions from different people, but you know, we'll ask you some. How would you define the feeling of stress?
How will I define
the feeling?
The feeling of stress.
Feeling of stress.
Stress is an inner tension that people feel. It can come either from internal stimuli or external stimuli. That tension is perceived in different ways by different people.
What situations do you associate with it, with the stress? What kind of situations mostly in reality?
Well, again, it depends on many factors, how you perceive the stress. Sometimes chronic stress isn't perceived as stress. And in fact, it still is. Sleep deprivation is one of them. People don't perceive of it as a chronic stress. But here's an interesting thing. Decreased sleep is equal to every other human health factor. Same as not getting enough sleep is the same as if you have diabetes. Not getting enough sleep is equal to all the negative things that happen if you have high blood pressure. Not getting enough sleep is equal to all the same things as if you have asthma. It's equal in severity because of its consequences to every other health factor. So physical exercise, sleep, and the physical activity and socialization, those things all start.
Very good, very good. What are the most effective strategies for reducing stress?
Well, I
according to you, of course.
Right, and for each person, you need to have a different ways of dealing with the stress. I like to, because I'm a psychiatrist, I like to first start physical. First, I make sure that they're emotionally feeling right.
Okay.
So I look at the interplay between the body and mind, because that's where I do. First, you have to make sure the person's actually healthy. Let me give you an example. Certain people, no antidepressant works. No antidepressant works because their vitamin D levels are low. So a lot of times I've had other psychiatrists refer to me and says, some of them sent me their own children. So you would check these things and you find out, okay, well, this person is hypothyroid. They're not feeling depression just because of depression. It's because they are feeling that because their thyroid levels are low. Your vitamin D levels are low. No antidepressant is going to work with you if vitamin D levels are low. So we look for the physical things, and then we look for I like to give people an armamentarium of things, both physical and then later on physical, societal, and then I call the biopsychosocial model. Biology, psychology, and then your social model, the social model of faith. Your biology increases first from what components you have that are causing the stress. They be physical. And I like to have people learn things that will deal with the stress. Breathing techniques that help you deal with the stress. I like people to learn I teach them how to do self-hypnosis. And as you do self-hypnosis, you're able to relax yourself in a way. Some people try to do yoga and things like that. John Paul II and Pope Benedict actually pointed out that intense prayer is equal to the same meditative states as yoga. So you don't have to go to a yoga class. You can do the same thing with intense prayer. So you can use those things to help you physically, the breathing techniques, the meditative techniques, and they work. I remember one patient, I taught him how to do this, and he was having a panic attack, so I showed him breathing techniques. He did the breathing techniques. Then he had a panic attack in the waiting room towards primary care doc. He had a panic attack, but luckily he did the breathing techniques, which we practice. And then, so the nurse took his blood pressure and said, "My God, that's the lowest blood pressure reading you had." And I said, see, you did that yourself.
You did that.
I didn't do it. You learned to do that yourself. And you just have to sometimes teach people how to do those things.
My God, that's a good story. Jose, do you think, this is a question from a bishop friend of mine, because we're always talking that we are busy all the time. And, he said, do you think a little bit of stress is good for people?
It depends on the person. For some people, yes, they feel the need for stress. It depends on it really depends on their socialization level. In some societies are increasingly hectic, but you still have to make out time for yourself, which is why prayer is so important. Meditative techniques are really important for most people, because you need to be able to shut down. What's fascinating is the brain has two different parts to it. One that maintains you awake, called the reticular activating system, and then they have the default network. The default network has to fire off. The Buddhists call it the monkey brain. So these stray thoughts going in through your mind left and right. Some people think those are unconscious thoughts. No, they're actually part of what they call the deep default network. That default network helps the circuits in your brain stay active. It's like the machine that you have in your computer where it's active but not on. When your computer, it's active, it's on, but the image is not there. That's the default network in the brain, and that's actually what it's copied from. So that you learn to bring that down to a level that is not stressful. In fact, it's relaxing for you, and that's why you'll be able to do that. Sometimes you have to shut off all other stimulation to make sure that you internally are okay.
Okay. This is a question from somebody from our divorce group here at St. Pius. We have a divorce group. If you're dealing with that and that's hard, we have a place here for you, and make sure to show up. We'll give you more information, or call Carm. She will give you more information about that. This person asked me, like, do you think being single or marriage is more stressful?
That's a good question.
What are the pros and cons? And I know we are shorter in time, but
All right.
yeah.
All right. That's a very good question. It depends. I think you have to choose the right person to marry before you consider any other thing. Some people get married because they're pregnant. The wife is pregnant. Some people get married for other reasons. But in it, there's a commitment to the marriage. All of the studies show that people who are married are actually happier than people who are not married. Even people never married, living together, have worse health statistics than people who are married and unhappy.
Okay.
Let that sink in for a second. Here's the other interesting thing, just to get a little bit humorous. People who are married have more sex than single people. Happily married people have more sex than they're like, oh, really? No. The media will tell you something different. They'll make chronic jokes about that. But the statistics for it are been reproduced worldwide. So you can. Part of it is there's an influence of society trying to break down the family. There's reasons for that. There's religious reasons for that. There's philosophical reasons. But the family's hated right now. And in fact, that's the unit that makes the church. So it's really attack on the church. Yeah. The way to break down the church is you break down the family. So there's this, since the 60s, there's been a movement towards separating men and women. Men and women are both created by God. We're complementary to each other. Neither one has everything, and you need the other person. Yeah. So they're complementary to each other. So being married is a state where most people are much happier than it is being separated or divorced. Even in people who have been cohabitating, never married, their statistics show a worsening of healthcare problems, a worsening of every single thing in comparison with a person who's married.
That's good. This is a question from one of our parishioners. She's 22. Will you choose a high-stress job with high pay or a less-stress job with less pay, and why?
That's actually interesting. There's actual statistics on that. Let me bring it to the end. I always say you never start a race without knowing what your finish line is. So the statistics show that the happiest people when they retire are not the people who love their job and are not the people who hated their job. The happiest people in retirement are the people who liked mostly their job, but there were aspects that they didn't like at all about it. That medium is the people who do best in retirement. So too high a stress job will induce burnout.
Okay.
Too high a stress job, your anger and frustration, the stress that it produces, will ensure you that you will not be happy at that job. You will leave that job. Some people, when they feel highly stressed, they badger everybody else. I call it spreading the wealth. You don't feel well. You want to make sure everybody else doesn't feel well at all. And so you spread misery to other people because you're not feeling it. So my answer to that is a job that pays less but is less stressful to you.
Less stressful.
Because those are the things that last longest. Actually, before this Pope Leo, the previous Pope Leo actually wrote an encyclical on the dignity of work.
Yeah. Rerum Novarum.
Exactly. And it was interesting. It was around the time that communism was surging as a philosophical mode. And he said, look, if your work increases your dignity as a human being, then it's worth it. The exchange, though, isn't. And I'm trying to paraphrase something he wrote that was huge.
Yeah.
But if it increases your dignity at work, with work, then it's something that's helpful to you. If you feel dignified in what's going on, if you feel you're not dignified, that this does not enhance you, that's not where you need to be. Now, granted, some people have to do that for short periods of time until something else happens. True.
Okay. Jose, we always end. Thank you so much. Wonderful podcast. I'm sure people will love it because it was a ton of questions about stress. But we always end this podcast asking, if Jesus Christ show up here today to you in person, what you will say to him?
That's an interesting question. I would say thank you.
Thank you.
I would say thank you, Lord. Please continue to help me.
Yeah.
So I pray for about 45 minutes every morning when I get up, and then I expose myself to certain wavelengths of light, which I find helpful. So I combine the physical and the religious at the same time. So yes, and so every day, first thing is thank you, Lord, and then I ask for prayers for the people that I pray for.
Yeah. Any suggestion to the camera, to one of our parishioners or somebody listening to this podcast, a life advice for those who are dealing with the stress and depression right now?
I think it's important to consider that faith can help you in your struggles. Psychiatry has a component in it. You need both. You need both in your life because both are journeys, and use the full armamentarium of God. Like the biblical quote, use the full armamentarium of God because, it's there, it's always available. It's like God's grace. Once you realize it's always there, always pouring out for you, use it.
Okay.
So I view this as all completely complementary. I think, though, my one warning to people about therapy is there's a lot of people out there in doing therapy that aren't trained to do therapy. It becomes a friendship as opposed to a therapy.
Okay.
So I do warn people, make sure you have somebody who's trained in that to help you, because sometimes there's a French saying which I love: a camel is a tiger designed by a committee. So sometimes people in some of these things, they start off, okay, I'm going to make a tiger, and they wind up with a camel because they start off someplace, and if we put God there, because God loves us, we know we're putting a good thing in front of us.
That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jose. Where do you sit when you come to Mass? Where are your place in the church? Stafford, main, or chapel side? Main.
I'm usually around the third or fourth row.
Third floor. Yeah. Pew. Now we know. I know. Now the people, if somebody wants to approach you to talk to you,
Sure. I'm always
free here in Mass.
Free to the Mass. My private practice is closed, so I don't take in any new patients. But I think I think one other thing is also, like I've mentioned, the support groups that are here at St. Pius.
Oh, yeah.
Those are actually group therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And group therapy is a technique that works really well. You have your peers, people who are in the same situation you have. You don't get that outside in the world.
No.
You get that here.
For free.
For free.
Okay, Jose, thank you so much. God bless you all. Thanks for always watching or listening this podcast. I hope you found this podcast very helpful. Thank you for all of you who helped me to prepare this podcast. Thank you for all your questions. And, thank you, Jose. God bless you all. Stay tuned with St. Pius. We love you here. And remember, as I always said, this is not about perfection. This is about people who are trying every day to do the best to be close to Jesus Christ the Lord. God bless you all. And bye-bye. See you later. Ciao, ciao.